what's new on the Burlington waterfront. Hey, now it's happening at the waterfront on Lake Champlain. Whatever the weather, there's so much to do on the new waterfront, the Burlington waterfront.
Welcome to On the Waterfront. I'm your host, Mariah Riggs, and this month I am happy to have Angie Grove, who is the Executive Director of the Ethan Allen Homestead Museum in Burlington, Vermont. Welcome to the show, Angie.
Thank you for having me.
So I wanted to kind of ask you, it sounds like you have a background in history, so how did you end up at the Ethan Allen Homestead?
Well, we can blame it on American Girl dolls, but not the dolls, the books. I was an avid reader growing up, and I read all of the American Girl books, and my favorite was Felicity, who grew up in colonial Williamsburg during the Revolutionary War. And I was really intrigued by, I didn't have the articulation at 8 years old, but I was really intrigued by the ideas of a democracy at the time, the equality, the spirit of justice and freedom, and all of those idyllic philosophies that people were fighting for in the Revolutionary War. So as soon as I graduated high school, I moved across country to the East Coast. I'm from Washington State, to the East Coast to study the Revolutionary War.
Oh, wow, which makes sense.
Yes,
because this is where it was.
This is where it happened. It's hard to study the Revolutionary War in Seattle. Yes.
Yes, we hadn't quite gotten there yet.
No.
That's so cool. So Felicity, yeah, I was a Christian girl, so that was me.
She was one of my favorites too.
My friend was Samantha. It was a whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
So how long have you been at the Ethan Allen home?
So I just passed my 3rd year anniversary.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And every year I look outside in March and April and I say, how are people going to come here on May 1st? It's still the middle of winter, and it's snowing today as we're talking, but in just 2 weeks, it's going to turn into the most beautiful site in Burlington. It's a mile north of downtown, of Church Street, but it's like you're out in the country in the middle of nowhere. It's just gorgeous.
So maybe, I mean, some of our viewers may not be familiar with the Allen home. So maybe letting some of our viewers know exactly where you are, because I know there's hiking trails there. There's a lot to do at the Allen home.
Yes, there is. So the Ethan Allen Homestead is a park, and within the park there is a museum. There are other things within the park as well, like you just mentioned. So the Ethan Allen Homestead Park is owned by the Winooski Valley Park District, so they're our founding partner on the site. And so within the park, there's everything you can think of in a recreational park. There are community gardens, and there's a lot of different community garden groups that farm there. And there's a bike path with Burlington Wildways, and then the city of Burlington has the Route 127 bike path, which is a paved bike path as well. Oh. And there's a canoe access point. The Winooski River runs through the area, and then hiking trails that include the farm fields, the woods, and the wetlands.
So it's an incredible resource for people in the Burlington area.
Absolutely. And then there are, in addition to the park, there are 3 other organizations that work there year-round. So the Ethan Allen Homestead Museum, and the Alno-Biwi, which is the Abenaki Cultural Group, and then Burlington Forest Preschool does outdoor-based education for young children year-round as well.
So let's get into those 3 different things that you talked about.
Yeah.
So it sounds like the Allen House is the first thing that we were talking about. And what is that?
So the Allen House is the oldest house that is still standing in Burlington. It was built, we believe, in 1785, and then it was continuously lived in for about 200 years. And in the 1970s, the property became a recreational park, and that's when it stopped being lived in by the people farming the land.
Wow.
And
that's really recent.
It was really recent. In the 1980s, the house was highly restored back to its 18th century appearance. So the house is a mixture today of original framework and foundation pieces, as well as reconstructed pieces based on 18th century materials to make it look like the original house, or what was speculated to the original house to look like.
So it kind of falls into sort of, you know, sort of that William and Mary, or like some of the places where you can go and actually experience what it's like to be in that time and place?
Absolutely. So we do guided tours every day, May 1st through October 31st.
Wow.
And you get to visit not just the Allen House, the Abenaki Village, Fanny's Kitchen Garden, and the house. And when you walk into the house with your tour guide, they'll tell you how people cooked over the fires, how they churned the butter, how they wrote with quill and ink, how they tightened the ropes on the bed frame so they could sleep tight every night.
Wait, is that where sleep tight comes from?
Absolutely. The mattress sat on ropes that were woven through the wooden frame.
I thought it was how you were tucked in.
No, you had to tighten your ropes or else you'd sag all night long.
Oh, that's interesting. Do they use feather mattresses? Or
If
straw?
you were rich enough, you had a feather mattress. So we have a fancy bed in the house to replicate what Ethan and Fanny may have slept on, and they have a goose down mattress. And then underneath that is a straw tick is thrown underneath the bed for daytime storage. And then kids, servants, enslaved peoples, etc. in the 1700s would sleep on the floor on a straw-filled pillow, basically.
Oh, wow. So it was almost like a, yeah, that's interesting. It was like a futon almost.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
You'd have to pull it out for the sleeping and then tuck it away to get it out of the way for the daytime.
Wow. So it's basically like a straw mat.
Yeah, it wasn't the most comfortable. And on our tours in the house, we like things to be as hands-on as possible. So we have the house very strategically placed with mostly replica items, so everyone can touch everything, sit on everything, lay on everything. So if you come on a tour, you can actually lay on the straw tick mattress, see exactly how comfortable it was.
Ouch.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. And so, and it sounds like it's a really good day trip for families and
Absolutely. So in addition to the tours going every single day, we also have special events. We have one special event weekend every month where reenactors come and take over the homestead, so you can really see what life is like. They're cooking over the fire, they're dressed up in their colonial garb.
Really?
And so the local population around Burlington area here in Vermont, those are the events that are most popular with them to attend. It's really family friendly, where the reenactors will show you everything from how they fire their muskets to how they darn their socks.
oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, back when socks actually cost something.
Right, and when people didn't throw anything away. If it broke, you fixed it.
Yeah, and you were able to do that. That was like Yankee ingenuity.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and you had to be able to do everything. I love these pictures. I think it's a really exciting opportunity. If you've never been, you should definitely check out the Allen Homestead. Now, I wanted to talk to you because this is newer, is sort of the Abenaki part of the Allen Homestead. Can you tell me how that came into being?
Yeah, so around 2016 or so, there was a group called Alno-Baiwi that was working to create a cultural organization for Abenaki culture in Vermont, and that organization partners with the 4 state-recognized Abenaki tribes, and they were looking for a site. They needed a physical space with outdoor grounds, and we had the space. So my predecessor, Dan O'Neill, did an amazing job establishing a really strong partnership that resulted in quite a bit of public programming prior to COVID. Things have been a little bit harder since then, and there's been more things going on in the Abenaki community that have kept the public programming from coming back in full strength, which it is something that members of the Abenaki community should really be invited on to talk to you more about. I don't want to speak for them.
No, but I think it's really interesting that, and I love the fact that they're together, because it's a very similar period of time in Vermont history. And so to have the contrast between the two and to really kind of be able to experience the whole picture.
Yeah, well, and what's really interesting is because a lot of Americans tend to think immediately that history starts with the Revolutionary War. And so even just the way you phrased it is like they're together at the same time period. Yes, but no, because the indigenous peoples were here for 10,000 years before then, and they still are here today. But what makes the partnership with Alno-Baiwi so great is that their focus is on Abenaki culture today, whereas the Homestead Museum focuses on the Abenaki history from the the 1700s, the 1800s as well. So
Yeah, because the Abenaki was part, if you really want to go before the Revolutionary War, was the French and Indian War,
yes,
which we were a huge part of in Vermont.
yeah,
At least that's what I've been told.
this was the
You're
frontier
the actual
for
historian.
sure.
But, and so the Abenaki, unfortunately, and correct me if I'm wrong, the Abenaki didn't fight on the right side, so that's why they weren't the acknowledged ones by the English. Is that right, or am I completely wrong on that?
Most of the Abenaki sided with the French, who lost the war.
And so that,
and then they, all of a sudden, England took over Canada, and the Abenaki peoples in Canada and in Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, all of a sudden were under. Well, they weren't under British control, but the British believed they were under British control.
Yeah.
You know, the European domination of that area was now England, which had been their enemy.
and that was a huge. I mean,
It was a conflict,
Yeah,
for sure.
Exactly, and I don't know how many Vermonters are actually aware of that. Because they're always like, oh, the Iroquois, they have all their, and the Abenaki, because of the French and Indian War. Wrong side of history. It's a real.
Well, when history is written by the winners, then yes.
Yeah, it's a real thing throughout history. So another thing that kind of came out that kind of blew my mind is that the site has 6,000 years of human occupation.
Yes, so, and that's just based on the oldest artifact that we happened to find when archaeological digs took place there in the 1990s. There's very likely older human occupation and use of the land as well. But our oldest artifact is a stone point from about 6,000 years ago.
That's incredible.
Yes, so.
I mean, that might be one of the older artifacts in the state.
Absolutely. The whole Winooski River Valley, the whole Winooski River area was highly occupied by indigenous peoples, and that's where they farmed. That's where the land is most fertile, so that's where you could harvest the most crops, or not crops at that point, the most wild edibles. And then that's why it became the first place that the Abenaki people started farming, which was about 700, 600 years ago. Oh, wow. Right along the Winooski River.
And it makes sense. It's a delta, which tends to be that agricultural rich.
So, and when the French explorers are the first Europeans to come up the Winooski River in the 1600s, they wrote in their journals that the Abenaki peoples had cleared cornfields. They were cultivating and farming. They had cleared the fields along the Winooski River for farming. So we know that the Abenaki people were farming there. And Ethan Allen knew it too, and all of the Europeans knew it. You know, Ethan Allen was no exception. All the Europeans knew it, and they wanted to buy up all of the river farmland because that was the most fertile for farming.
Yeah.
So that's why the Allen family ended up in that site.
Oh, that's so interesting. So, and then there was a third component you were talking about, education programs.
Yes. So.
Camps?
Yes, so the Ethan Allen Homestead Museum has an education programs with local schools to do field trips. And this might be a good time to kind of go a little off topic to just mention that the funding for arts and cultural institutions has been challenged, to put it lightly, in recent months. And what that means, at least for the Ethan Allen Homestead Museum, is that a lot of our educational programs will be significantly cut down because they were mostly funded through grants to develop the programs and staff the programs. And so, you know, we have about $40,000 in federal grants right now that are threatened with the way things are going. And we were expecting about $80,000 next year in federal grants that I'm now not expecting.
Yeah, and that was foundational funding.
Yes, all of that money was going to go directly back into the community through our educational programs, as well as through preservation work on the Allen House. The Allen House is the oldest still standing building in the city of Burlington. And, you know, a 200-plus-year-old building needs a lot of maintenance. And there's some water damage right now that needs some immediate repairs. And this funding was going to go to that and the educational program. So with that funding being threatened and disappearing, we really rely on community support to keep these programs going.
And so that becomes a plea to our viewership that, you know, the Allen House is probably one of the most important historical buildings in the city of Burlington. And as a community, it's important that we step up and ensure its maintenance and the education of further generations to be able to access the site and learn about our history.
Absolutely. Our educational programs have increased 50% over the last 2 years.
That's wonderful.
And but our ability to meet that demand is going to diminish if we don't have the funding to continue the programs.
And more than ever, those kinds of historical programs are really important.
Yeah. And I don't know if a lot of the viewers know this, but the Ethan Allen Homestead Museum is the only history museum in Burlington. So if there are local schools who want to go on a history field trip, I mean, we're the only one within the city to go to.
So also, I mean, I think that's also another good point. I know we have teachers and educators who do watch the program. How would an educator reach out to you and schedule a tour or something with the school? Yeah,
so I can say the email address.
Okay.
Maybe CCTV can edit this and put it at the bottom of the screen. education@ethanallenhomestead.org.
Okay.
You can also visit our website, which is ethanallenhomestead.org, and there's an education tab.
Oh, what a wonderful
you can
thing.
click. Yeah.
That's really exciting.
Yeah.
What a great resource. And so, okay, so, you know, and I do want to state that, like, you know, obviously we know there are funding issues across the board, and now more than ever, people need people's help to support sort of these cultural institutions.
Yeah, and I think right now it's, we're in I don't know, awkward is the right word, but kind of awkward position where, in a way, we were expecting quite a boom year because this year, 2025, is the 250th anniversary of the start of the American Revolutionary War. And next year, 2026, is America's 250th anniversary, the semi-quincentennial, 2026. And we have developed a lot of new programs. We have a brand new exhibit we're opening up next month.
Okay, and what's the new exhibit?
So the new exhibit is called Voices of the Revolution, War on the Northern Frontier. And we are showcasing untold stories of people who were here in Burlington or during the Revolutionary War. They all have an association with the homestead site. They either owned the site or lived on the site or passed through the site. And they all lived through the Revolutionary War, and none of their stories have been told before. So cool. So we have women, we have a black man named Newport, we have a man who switched sides in the middle of the war, as well as Joseph Louis Gill, who was an Abenaki chief during the Revolutionary War. So these stories have not been told in a museum around here ever before. And we partnered with local artists to tell their stories. So it's an art exhibit in which you get to learn history through art.
I love that. That's great.
Yeah.
What a cool exhibit.
So we are really hoping, we have an educational curriculum, so we're really hoping our educational program can keep going so schools can come and visit, can see the exhibit, and we have an educational curriculum that goes with it where students then create their own pieces of art to tell the stories of the Revolution as well.
Oh, that's wonderful. Now, is the exhibit going to be up and running on May 1st when you guys open up?
I hope so.
Okay.
I have to, it will be mostly done, if not all the way done. It is funded through federal grants, and we did get held up for a couple months there.
Okay, that's really, I mean, please, I can't wait to go check it out.
Yeah.
I'll
let you know. I'll send you an invitation.
Oh, thank you. So getting back into the 250th anniversary, you were talking about the different events going on, because next year, 1776, is the Declaration of Independence.
Yes, so that's the Declaration of Independence has been considered the date that the United States starts. Yes. And so that has been the date that people have created the anniversary. So like the bicentennial, 1976, 200 years after 1776, so 2026 is 250 years.
That's a big deal.
That's a big deal. There's going to be events going on all over the country. There's a state commission. I sit on one of the history committees for the commission. And, a lot of organizations like mine planning events. Hopefully the funding won't dry up and we'll actually be able to put on these events. And I think what is important with these events is that this is a commemoration, not necessarily a celebration.
Yep.
And commemoration, I think, is a more inclusive term because it can include celebration, it can include remembrances, memorials, and for some aspects and for some people, mourning.
Yeah.
and a time of reflection to think about the ideals of the revolution, celebrate the ones that we've accomplished, and reflect on the ones we're still working on.
The work in progress, the messy work in progress of American democracy.
Exactly. Like, if you were to look at the original copies of the U.S. Constitution or the Declaration of Independence, I mean, you'll see edits and crossouts and revisions and things written in the margin, and there are so many versions, and it really shows that they were just making it up as they went, you know, and they then trusted us to continue to do that job.
Yes, we're the legacy.
Yes, and we're supposed to continue working on it. There is no one set time where America was perfect that we need to get back to. It's always
been a work in progress.
Always a work in progress.
And it is kind of an evolution too. I think it was kind of like, let it go and see what happens.
Yes, sometimes for better, sometimes for worse.
The grand experiment.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's fun because I feel like the Allen Homestead is sort of this microcosm of sort of the seed of where a lot of that came from, you know?
Yeah, well, what's really interesting is that the Ethan Allen Homestead as a site can really be a microcosm of all American history from all time periods, because it has the like 10,000 years of Abenakis in the area, you know, definitely 6,000 years of them being right there, like dropping artifacts into the ground. And then the French came through, and then the British colonists came through, and then the British colonists moved there permanently, and which had a devastating effect on indigenous populations as well. And then when you look at the Allen house specifically, you know, the Allen family was the last owner-occupants of the house. As soon as they left in the early 1800s, the next occupants to live there were they were poorer, like tenant farmers. Wow. And the house itself was owned by a richer white man who lived like in the city or in Montpelier or not even in the state. And he hired these mostly immigrant, a little poorer families to live in the house and farm the land. Wow. Not for their own real economic gain, but for the gain of...
To pay rent.
To pay rent. Basically. And so the long history of the Allen house is primarily these immigrant families who lived in the house through the 1800s and the early 1900s, farming the land there. And then when you see their history, you can see the evolution of farming as America goes through the Industrial Revolution, and they industrialize farming. So all of a sudden we're starting to find metal farm tools and artifacts and a lot more of them and machines in our, you know, archaeological collection. And then you see the American middle class in the history after World War II, when there's an economic boom here. And so the, you know, socioeconomic demographic of the occupants kind of changes once again. And so the entire history of the United States can be seen just right there at that site.
So it's like a peek into sort of the evolution of the American experience.
Absolutely.
That's pretty
cool.
From
all different time periods.
And it's interesting how it did reflect those shifts in cultural. I mean, that I didn't realize that it was rented out to you know, tenant farmers.
Basically from 1800 to 1970. Most of its history is tenant farmers living in the house.
Now, do we? I mean, you probably know this. What happened to the Allen family?
Well, Ethan Allen died, very famously.
Yeah, so yeah, I know, but
he lived in the house for less than 2 years.
Okay.
This was his retirement home.
Okay.
This is where he moved after the Revolution. He wanted to be a philosopher farmer, right? He wrote a philosophy book about religion. He was against organized religion and Christianity. He was more for what we now call deism, or just nature and reason and logic. So you can actually read his book all about philosophy.
I'm actually kind of interested. And what is it? Do you know what it's called?
It's called Reason, the Only Oracle of Man. And the Ethan Allen Homestead Museum.
What an Enlightenment book.
Yeah, he wanted to be thought of as an Enlightenment philosopher.
Okay.
He used to sign his letters late in life, the philosopher, Ethan Allen.
Oh my gosh,
that's how he wanted to be known.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, and the Ethan Allen Homestead Museum, is, I believe, the only place still publishing the book in print. So you can go to our online gift shop at ethanallenhomestead.org if you'd like to buy a copy.
I might actually have to. I'm very curious.
It's a little dense because it is Enlightenment philosophy, but we also sell the Essential Guide to Ethan Allen, which is like the dummied version.
Yeah, no, I'm okay. I'm a little okay with my Rousseau. I can read.
Okay, there you go.
I read all. I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
But that's very entertaining. So curious.
So that's how Ethan spent his time there. Was writing philosophy, writing letters, and overseeing the farming. And the start of the Vermont Republic, I believe, right? Absolutely. And the testimony we have is that Ethan was out on the fields farming himself too. He wasn't just sitting in the house watching other people sweat over the labor.
Like John Adams. It was a real thing.
Right. Yes. So
good New England farmers.
New England was a little bit of a different stock than the down south heads of house. But so Ethan went on a trip to go buy some hay. He had a bad hay crop that year, but his cousin Ebenezer, who lived out on the islands, had a good hay crop. So he went out to get some hay with Newport. I mentioned Newport earlier. Newport was a black man who only shows up in the historical records on this one day. Wow. And there are 3 or 4 people who give testimony to this day because Ethan Allen dies on this trip. And in all of them, they mention this man Newport who, in these testimony records written in the 1800s, called him a mulatto or a Negro man. And one of those people name him as Newport. So we know his name. Okay. But we don't know anything else about him. Wow. But Newport presumably was living and working on the farm with Ethan, and they went out to go get the hay. It was a 2-day trip, and they almost made it home. Apparently, the lake was frozen because it was February. So right as they entered the mouth of the Winooski River, Ethan went into a daze and started convulsing. Oh, wow. And Newport held the reins in one hand and held Ethan's body down with his other hand. So that's the only other thing we know about Newport, is he must have been a fairly strong man because Ethan was a big man. Yeah. And then when they got to this house, Newport threw Ethan on his shoulder, carried him to the house and laid him out. And Ethan was in a coma by then. We believe he had a stroke.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So what happened to the Allen family? Well, they lost their head of household and they dispersed. So at that point, Ethan's daughters from his first marriage went to other family members, and the eldest got married after that. And Ethan's widow, Fanny, and the 2 children she had by Ethan, and then the third on the way, because she was pregnant. Oh, wow. They went back to her family in Westminster, Vermont. Okay. But eventually Fanny remarried, and even though she was his widow, she did not get to inherit this property in Burlington. Women were not allowed to inherit property if there was a male heir to inherit it. And she had 2 she had 2 sons. So her 2-year-old son
inherited it.
Owned the property.
It's like peerage in England.
It was a sexist society, for sure.
I mean, it's very similar to the peerage rules.
And primogeniture and all of
that stuff.
Absolutely.
In England.
So
she was basically like the regent for the 2-year-old on the property.
Well, she didn't even get because she was a woman. So it went to Ira Allen, their uncle. Oh yeah, because he was a male. Okay. So when Fanny remarried, she actually used the legal system to get back the property by having her husband sue Ira for guardianship of the sons. Yes. So that they could take control of the property. So Fanny could take control of the property again.
Which makes, and I'm assuming Ira he didn't fight it or anything, did he?
He did. They had to go to court.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's so interesting.
Ira is often told as a villain in a lot of stories of history. I wonder what was really going on, but a lot of people sued him over property rights.
This guy.
But you know what? We have we have a guest speaker, Kevin Graffinino, who's coming on the 27th of April at 2 p.m. It's a free event for the public, and he's going to talk all about Ira Allen.
Oh, so if I want to find out more, I can
Yes.
come on the 27th?
Absolutely, just a couple weeks from now.
Oh my gosh, that ties directly in. That's
I'm sure
awesome.
Kevin will tell us Ira's side of the story. But Fanny and Jabez Pennyman won the lawsuit. They lived in the house for about 8 more years, and then they sold it.
Okay.
Yeah, they moved to Colchester, where Fanny Allen Hospital currently sits. But it's not the Fanny I've just talked about. It's her daughter. Fanny Allen Jr., or Fanny Margaret Allen, was Vermont's first Catholic nun. And she was a nun up in Montreal. And she nursed soldiers in the War of 1812 and worked at a hospital that was run by the nuns.
So she was a nurse, and that's how it got tied into the Fanny Allen Hospital.
Absolutely. That's why they've named the hospital after her.
I learned something every
Yeah,
day.
so
That's
Fanny
great.
Margaret Allen is the Fanny Allen who became a nurse. She was 5 years old when she lived in the Allen house at one point. So she had her childhood there.
But she went to Montreal to become a nun.
Yes.
Which also speaks again to that Vermont-Montreal connection.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's
I mean,
definitely
that
the
was
largest, closest city.
that's where everyone turned for their entire economy before the canal was built to connect the waterways down to New York, because the waterways were the highways.
Yep.
So if you got on Lake Champlain, if you went south, you hit a dead end. So you headed north, and you went up to Montreal, you went up to Quebec, St. Lawrence, and then out into the Atlantic Ocean from
And
there.
it all flows north anyways into the St. Lawrence Seaway.
Absolutely.
So it makes sense.
Yeah, so that's why there's another historic event that happened at the homestead that is related to that waterway and how all the economy flowed north. Right before the War of 1812, which was against England, Thomas Jefferson, the U.S. president, he cut off trade with Canada, because Canada was owned by England.
Makes sense.
And he was against England. So, he liked the French. So he was against
We know.
England, so he cut off trade
He's a
with
serious Francophile.
Absolutely. So he cut off trade with Canada, and the locals here were mostly not in favor of this, because that was their main source of economy, was trading with the Canadians. So there was quite a bit of smuggling going on.
Smuggler's notch.
Yes, exactly. This is before that, though. This is when smuggling was mostly happening on the waterways. And the Winooski River, right there at our site, it was a perfect place for a smuggling ship to hide out when they knew that the custom collectors were on their tail. So really close to the homestead, just about a mile upriver, there was a ship called the Black Snake that the smugglers had, and the custom officials were catching up to them. And so the smugglers actually set up a trap. They anchored the boat, they got on land, and they waited for the custom officials to come and board their boat, and then they opened fire.
Wow, that
This
was amazing.
resulted in at least one death. I might have been more, but ultimately one of the first murder trials in Vermont and the first execution from a murder in Burlington
Wow, it was from that particular event.
was from that event. And there's a state historic marker just a few yards from the Allen house about
Yeah, which I
that
think
event.
we showed. We just showed it.
Yeah.
So that's great. That's
Probably
super
on there.
exciting.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, this is very exciting. So
Yeah.
I wanted to thank you so much for coming on the program.
Well, thank you for having me.
And Angie, do you have any kind of last comments? I know, come on down to the Ethan Allen house. Bring your kids.
Yes, I also want to emphasize that we are a nonprofit. We are not a state historic site. So our funding is primarily through the tourism industry, with tourists coming and paying admission for our programs, and local donations from supporters and members. So if you're able to give, if you're able to help support us, we always need volunteers. We need new board members who have fundraising experience. If grants are going to dry up, we need to do some more fundraising, and there's just a lot of opportunity for you to get involved. This is really a community site.
Yeah, by the way, if you have time, being a front desk volunteer, I understand is one of the most rewarding volunteer opportunities in Vermont. So definitely check them out on that. They have morning and afternoon sessions.
Absolutely.
And it's
Every day, May through October.
and it's a wonderful place to hang out. Thank you so much, Angie, and thank
for
you so
having
much
me.
for all the work you're doing. And please support the Allen House. It's a real jewel in Burlington, and it's very important to our community. So thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you guys so much for being here. I'll see you again next month. Take care.